Hi, welcome, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Taylor. I'm going to be doing a presentation on file management today. We've got a number of Chief Architect staff here to help us today. So as we're going through this whole session, feel free to type in any questions that you might have in the chat on the side there. The presentation is going to be about 15 minutes, give or take, after which we're going to open up for some questions, just do a kind of question and answer session there. So feel free to join in on that. The session will be recorded, so we're going to be sending out a link at the end of this. There's going to be a survey in there as well. So as always, we value any sort of feedback you might give us there. So with that, yeah, we'll go ahead and just get started.
It's easy enough to jump into the design process without thinking about how you plan to organize your files. You may even feel that it's unimportant, but it doesn't take long to learn how important it can be to make sure that your files are all saved in a nice, organized way. There are a few file management tips that can be a huge help in keeping your files organized as your plans get larger and more complex, and as you start working on more projects. Tip number 1. Use a project folder. The first and most basic thing you can do is to set up a good location to save your projects. By default, the first place Chief Architect uses to save new files in is your Systems Documents folder. This in itself really isn't ideal for a number of reasons. First, when saving a lot of files in one spot, it doesn't take a long time for them to start piling up, which makes it inherently difficult to find what you're looking for. But also, your Documents folder is a general location that your computer uses for all sorts of things. And you probably don't want your project files all mixed in with important tax documents and family photos. Now, it's still fine to use your Documents folder, or desktop, or really anywhere on your computer, but whatever location you decide to use, you definitely want to create a new folder that will be used exclusively for your Chief Architect files, in order to keep them separate from everything else on your computer. As you can see here, I'm using my desktop, but I've created a new folder simply titled Chief Plans. Now, technically, I can just start saving files right here, but that's kind of like having a silverware drawer that I just dump all my forks and knives into. Sure, they're separated from the plates and the bowls, but that's hardly what I'd call organized. You still want to separate your project folders from one another, so inside of this plans folder I've created a new folder for each project. You could use client folders too, if that makes more sense for how you work. There's no strict rule here, just do whatever works best for you. But it's inside of these subfolders that you'll be saving any plan or layout files, as well as any other files, photos, CAD files, etc., that are specific to any given project. There are a few reasons for this management system, aside from just staying organized and being able to find the files that you need when you need them. Looking at this layout file, for instance, each one of these views was sent to this layout file from a plan file. Double-clicking on a plan view will open this plan file in a new tab. So there's a direct link from this layout to that plan. So layouts have to know where to find any file that's been linked to them, and if your projects aren't being managed in any good way, and you need to, say, move a project to another computer or send it to a colleague, you run the risk of breaking these links, especially if you have to dig through a folder with 100 files in it trying to find the right ones. However, if you always make sure that your plan and layout files live side by side, then you'll guarantee that your layouts will always remain linked. A note about layouts. A lot of people save their plans as revisions and simply append a date or Rev 1, Rev 2, and so on, which is fine, unless you've already sent views to a layout. When a plan's view is sent to a layout, the layout remembers the name of the file that the view was sent from. So if you save a new copy of a plan with a different name, the layout has no idea that anything has changed and will continue to link to the views from the original plan. One way to avoid this is to always maintain a sort of primary working file and save each revision as sort of an archive. That way, the plan that the layout is linked to will never change, but your previous revisions will be maintained should you need to relink your layout to them. Another method is to simply be diligent and hyper-aware of what your layouts are linked to, which is just a good idea regardless, and manually rely on relinking your layouts to the new plan files whenever you save a revision. To demonstrate this, I'm going to take the current plan that I'm working on and add a revision cloud, just so we can tell that it's different. Then go to File, Save As, and I'll give it a new name, Revision 2. Now here's where things get a little weird, because when I go back to my layout, it appears as if it's updated appropriately, but this is just the program linking the active plan to the active layout. But if I close and reopen my layout, it appears to have reverted back. But this is the actual link that we're seeing here. So just be aware that if you have a layout open and you do a save as on a plan, we're changing the active plan file to a new plan, and the layout can appear disassociated at first. Now that I've reopened my layout, I can see that this view is still linked to the original plan, and I can verify this by double-clicking on the plan view and looking at the name of the file that it opens. I can change this by going to Tools, Layout, Reference Plan Files. Here, I can select the original plan file, press Browse, and select the new Revision 2 version of the plan. Once I press OK, all views linked to the old plan will be relinked to the Revision 2 plan and reflect the information there instead. So if you're ever working on a layout and feel that things maybe aren't linking correctly, double-check what plans are linked to this layout and relink them if necessary. And all of this is so much easier to do if the project files are all in one folder. Okay, back on track. Once you've decided on a dedicated location for your projects folder, you're ready to get to work. However, you'll want to set up Chief Architect to work with this folder as well. We can access the program's Preferences dialog by going to Edit, Preferences. For you Mac users, it's going to be under the Chief Architect menu, or by clicking on the Preferences icon at the top toolbar. Under General, New Plans, there's an option that determines what the program does when we open or save a new file. By default, either of these actions simply opens the last place you saved or opened a plan from, and without making any file management considerations at all, this probably makes the most sense. The downside of this is that we run the risk of accidentally saving new plans into existing projects. Instead, we want to make sure that we always return to the same starting point so that we know exactly where we're saving our files. To do this, I'm going to change this option from Use Last Folder to Use This Folder, then click Browse and locate my new Chief Plans folder on my desktop. What this means is that anytime I open or save a new file, I will be taken directly to my Projects folder, where I then can select the appropriate project, or create a new folder if I'm starting a new project. This way, I'll never accidentally save something in the wrong spot, and I'll always know where everything is. Another thing to consider, and at minimum just to be aware of, is the auto-saving and auto-archiving features within Chief Architect. Going back into my Preferences dialog, under the General panel is a section for File Management. Here are the settings for the auto-save feature and the auto-archive feature. These can seem a little confusing at first, as the names are very similar. I mean, isn't auto-saving the same as auto-archiving? The difference is that auto-save is an automated process that occurs by default every 5 minutes, whereas auto-archive automatically creates an archive every time you save your plan, so it's reliant on your actions, where auto-save is just always working in the background. More importantly though, auto-save is a single file that will be continually overwritten, where auto-archive automatically creates a new version of the file based on the selection below, hourly, daily, or every previous save. Meaning that every hour or day it will create a new archive, giving you a sort of history of each file. Previous save just saves a single archive per file, similar to autosave. Below this is a warning threshold, which is not a limit, but just a number of archives that will be created before the program displays an option allowing you to manage, in other words delete, any old archive files. Another aspect of the autosave feature, though, is that if something happens to your computer and Chief Architect were to close unexpectedly, the program will try to create an autosave backup file, and will prompt you to open the backup instead the next time that plan is opened. So if you ever get a message saying that a newer version of the plan exists, I recommend that you always say yes to open that backup version. Pressing no will open the saved version that you have, which may be missing some of the work that has been done since the last save, but hadn't been captured by the autosave. So it never hurts to open the backup. If it's at a good spot and everything looks fine, then your work is saved and you're all set. Otherwise, just close the backup version and reopen your saved plan file. That being said, when you do open an autosave backup file, you'll want to make sure that you go to File, Save As, and resave it back to the appropriate project folder, since that backup file lives in your Archives folder, and you don't want to save or work on files that are there. If at any point in time you need to access these archive files, with a plan or layout file open, you can go to the File menu and choose Manage Auto Archives. Or, outside of the program, simply browse to the program's data folder, which by default is in your Documents folder, and then into the Archives folder. Here, you will find a list of all your archived plan files that have been created, and most importantly, saved on this computer. Looking at this list of folders, you can see that each one is named the same as the plan or layout, and it can't do that until the file has a name. So it's crucial to remember that neither of these functions can operate until the file has been saved and given a name, which sums up tip number 2, save early and save often. There's also a more manual method of backing up a project, which can be used for archival purposes, or if you just need to move a project or send it to someone else, and that is using the Backup Entire Project feature. With a plan file open, under the File menu, you'll see Backup Entire Plan. In a layout, this is Backup Entire Project. The difference is that Backup Entire Plan only saves that one plan file, whereas Backup Entire Project will save that layout file and any plan file it is linked to. So you'll want to back up from the layout whenever possible. The Backup Entire Project dialog gives a few options: backup plan files and all referenced files, backup plan files only, and send backup files to zip archive. The referenced files that it's referring to here are largely the plan's materials, but also include any externally referenced files as well, such as imported PDFs and pictures. Plan files only excludes these files and creates a smaller archive, but may not be ideal depending on the complexity of the project. Checking the Send Backup Files to Zip Archives option tells the program that you want to create a zip file rather than creating a folder containing the project files. If you're sending the project to another computer, sending a zip file is certainly a better choice as there are smaller files, but if you're merely archiving a project or creating some sort of revision, it's probably not necessary. The last tip is optional and may not necessarily apply to everyone's situation, but it involves your computer's disk space and where Chief Architect stores files, rather than where you, the user, store your files. I mentioned the data folder before when talking about where to locate your archives. By default, the program's data folder is created in your Documents folder and is home to a variety of user-specific items like, again, your archives, but also user library files, toolbar and hotkey configurations, etc. Archives and library files especially can take up a lot of disk space, and a lot of computers have smaller but faster solid-state drives as their primary hard drive and a larger but slower supplemental storage drive. In these instances, it makes sense to move as much as you can off the main hard drive to free up disk space for your operating system and other programs. Going back to the Preferences dialog, on the Folders panel we can see the location of the data folder. Pressing Browse here allows me to navigate to a new location where I can move the entire data folder. Supposing that I only want to move my user library folder, or maybe I want to move them both, but separately, I'll need to uncheck the checkbox next to Keep User Library and Reference Files in Data Folder. Then, I can choose a different location for my user library files as well. Similarly, the system library files, which includes the core, bonus, and manufacturer catalogs, can also be relocated here as well. Once you press OK in this dialog, the program will automatically copy any affected files to the new location or locations. This is the same process for putting files onto a network location or in a cloud-based storage. Essentially, just redirect these folders to a network location or a cloud storage folder on your computer, and that's that. But I want to cover a few specifics on these topics. First, local networks. This is the most common practice in sharing files between multiple users all in the same location, and certainly a good way to share library catalogs within a team. But just be aware that Chief Architect library database files are not dynamic updating libraries, so when one person makes a change, it's not going to immediately appear to all other users. Rather, the library files are only loaded into Chief when the program is launched. So if two people are using Chief Architect and one of them downloads a new bonus catalog, for example, the other person won't see that new catalog until they close and relaunch the program. Similarly, the user-created user catalog files are only updated when the program is closed. So the person who updated the shared user catalog would have to close out of Chief Architect to update the catalog, then both users would need to relaunch the program to load the new catalogs. As you can guess, it's pretty easy to step on each other's toes when doing this, so it's important to communicate with anyone you're sharing libraries with. Cloud storage is rather similar, but instead of a network location on a local data server, cloud storage services create a local folder on your computer that they periodically synchronize with the cloud storage servers. So, for example, in order to synchronize your library catalogs between two computers using cloud storage, you would need to set up one computer to use that cloud storage location for their library folders, then allow the cloud storage to sync and back up those files, then you'd be able to set up the second computer to use that same location. This is complicated slightly for Mac users, as iCloud is likely set up to back up both your desktop and documents folders automatically, so files in those locations should already be synchronized. The only ones that won't be will be your system library files.
All right, well, that pretty much concludes the presentation that I've got. We're going to go ahead and open up for questions. If you use your control on the GoToWebinar, there's an option to raise hand on there, and we're going to have Carrie call out people, and we'll just kind of pick up some questions as we go. So, Carrie, do we have anyone to start?
we do. We have Vicki Worcester with a question. Hi, Vicki. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. I have a library of many details. And, you know, any given project, I may use 8, a dozen, 15 of those details.
Mhm.
When I set up my layout, I open each detail file and put it in the layout. I don't copy it and put it in the plan or the project file because that's very tedious. But then if I make an update to a detail or change its numeration, if I go back to that file, obviously it's not synced. Is there a way to do that that is more logical, but doesn't involve me having to import each drawing into the project and name it a different name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of different ways of kind of going about that, and I think one of the more common ways that, at least the way that I feel more comfortable with, and what I usually teach people is if you have a list of details, and it goes further than that too. If you have notes or really any sort of detail that that is going to be used commonly in multiple different projects. You can have them like what it sounds like. You just have them in your library, like a user library. One option is to just have in your plan template file, have a notes or details CAD detail page where you can have a lot of those things sort of saved in there. That way, any plan that you create, any project that you're working on, you'll basically have all the same general notes, details, various different little symbols and things that you might be using. And if you need to customize or change them for that specific project, then it makes it pretty easy because they're all just right there. And then if anything needs to change for that plan, it's really just isolated into that one plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do that on my layout template with general notes, like wall framing notes, roof framing notes, etc. But my details, each one is its own plan file. So, you know, when I'm putting them in the layout, I get the little notice that said this isn't in the same folder, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And I just say, don't worry about it and go ahead. I mean, there are some typical details that get used on most projects, but not that many of them because, you know, the details apply to different situations. Are the joists on top of the stem wall or are they hung to the stem wall? And, you know, is this a truss roof or rafter framed roof? It would be ridiculous to have all these dozens of details sitting there on my template file waiting to be used. I'm not sure whether, I guess I could do that.
Yeah, what some people will do as well is, and it kind of goes above and beyond, and it's maybe a little bit harder to manage. But if you have, instead of kind of relying on Chief Architect to have like a template plan file and a template layout file, you can have basically a template project, which is just a folder on your system. So like this, this Smith residence on the screen here. If I have all these things in here, as well as like a details plan that's part of that, if I just in Windows, not even in Chief, make a copy of that sort of template folder, then every plan would have the exact same detail. That way you always make sure that everything's all linked up there as well. It's not ideal because you kind of go outside of Chief to manage a lot of those things in doing the templates. But at the same time, there's pros and cons. The plus side of that would be if you make a copy of that template folder and then rename it, then rename the plan and layout, make sure that everything's all named right. Then you kind of rename things ahead of time and make sure that everything's all in the right place. But it does make things a little bit weird because you're going outside of Chief to manage that. Other than that, there really isn't a great way of doing that, just because you're kind of inherently, have this situation where your plan and layout are linking out beyond that plan. Like you were saying, it's going to some other spot, and when things move and stuff, it's just kind of inherently gonna have issues with that linkage. I don't know if there's a really great way of doing that other than just making a copy of that detail for every single plan that you're working on.
Yeah. Another question, it's just me. I don't share files with anybody unless I'm sending a PDF to an engineer or a contractor or surveyor. I back up my whole system on Carbonite, but should I also be backing up project folders to something like Dropbox or one of the other? And which cloud storage is the best one and that isn't going to fail or be hard to use?
Well, I think the second part of that question is probably the hardest one to answer. I don't know if we can really say what's the best. I mean, it's kind of just depends on what works well for you. I've personally used OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox. I currently like the one that I show on here is just, it's called Box Sync. They all work pretty well. I don't know if one objectively works better than the rest, but whether you should or shouldn't, it's kind of a tough one to answer. If you're doing like a Carbonite backup, I don't know that it would necessarily be required. I don't know that I would be like, oh yeah, definitely do that. Just because you're already making a backup, you already have those, just in case something goes south, you always have that way of getting back to it. I think one of the big things, or one of the big reasons why I would maybe suggest doing some sort of a cloud backup, aside from specifically sharing or sending files to someone else, is just on the off chance that maybe you have a different computer or you're going to be getting another computer. It makes that part a little bit easier. If you've got like a desktop, laptop kind of situation, that certainly helps, because then you just log into that account, you get the same files, and you're good from there. I don't know exactly. I'm not that familiar with Carbonite. I don't know if it has the same kind of thing or if it's just the actual like hard drive backup kind of scenario. But yeah, other than that, I don't know that it would be fully necessary to really do those specific backups.
Okay, it might be worth doing that with current ones. The older projects I archive off to a external hard drive. But of course, then, if your house burns down, there goes the external hard drive too. But
right,
which is the whole purpose for cloud storage. But
absolutely, just getting it off-site and making it not a local save. There's that sort of peace of mind. And some of the bigger ones, Dropbox and iCloud and OneDrive and those kind of things, they're not likely to just go away randomly. So they're probably okay.
Yeah. Okay, that gives me some good stuff to think about. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Taylor, we have Kathy Connon here with a question. Hey, Kathy, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm fairly new to Chief Architect, but I just wanted to go between my laptop and my desktop, and take my laptop when I'm traveling and then use my desktop here for more complicated drawings. And I tried doing that, and it was kind of like I got an error message saying, oh, you can't have, I'm a sole practitioner. You can't have two, even though I didn't have Chief Architect open on my Mac laptop, I got an error message on the desktop saying, oh, you need to, I forget what they said, like disassociate your license, and then you need to re-up your license on the desktop. So it was like I was a whole new user on my desktop, like none of my preferences were saved or anything. And I guess I'm confused about how is the best practice on my, as a single user, of going between my Mac laptop and my Mac desktop.
Sure. So when you're changing from one computer to the other, your files, your plans, materials, toolbars, and that kind of thing, really the stuff that I covered in there, talking about that data folder, those kind of things we can pretty easily, put onto a cloud storage. Like I was mentioning in iCloud, should kind of take care of some of that for you automatically to a certain extent, just because it by default backs up the documents folder, which contains most of that stuff. But the more system specific information, your licensing, so whatever product key you used, as well as any of your specific preferences, those are specific to that computer, so they're not going to get transferred over automatically. We don't currently have a really great way of just saying, hey, I'm this user and those are my settings, and have it like pull in automatically. So a lot of those things like preferences, there is technically a way of copying like preferences file from one computer to the next. It's not exactly the most straightforward, so it's not like just a couple clicks of the button. But generally speaking, we just set up the same kind of preferences on both computers, and then you should be good. Yeah, if I'm not sure if I can log into that or get a good example, but when you're actually, let me just pull up Chief here. On one computer, once you're actually logged in and using it, if you use the managed license, this is where you can deactivate this license from this computer. And then if I go onto another computer and use that same product key, it kind of just opens up that license and allows me to reactivate and use it elsewhere. If I don't deactivate from this computer first and then go to some other computer, then I have to do that online. But basically, you just go log into onto your account, and there's a digital locker section where you can click make available, and that's actually where you're going to get your product key anyway. But that's really how you're going to be transferring the actual usable license from one computer to the next. But yeah, it's only going to be active on one computer at a time.
Okay, so so basically, I should just copy my preferences, just open it up on my laptop, and then copy it over on my desktop. I mean, like just individually pick my preferences all over again on the desktop to save it. Is that right?
Yeah. There, and like I said, there is technically an INI file that can be copied and moved, but it's definitely a process. So I think it's probably, for the most part, unless you've like really customized a lot of your preferences, it's probably easier and just more straightforward just to open up Chief and just go through and just set all the preferences that you need. I find most people usually change a couple anyway, but yeah, if you've gone through and made a lot of changes, then maybe it makes sense to go a little bit deeper in. But yeah.
If I have a template or a previous plan out on the cloud, like in Dropbox, if I open that up and just do a save as, that'll save all my preferences.
On the plan, not preferences, because the preferences are specific to the program. Defaults are specific to that particular plan. So if you have like a plan template or a layout template file, those will have their own specific defaults in them that are saved within that file. And that's really the main idea, the main concept of having a template file is that it not only saves items and things, like if you have CAD details and whatnot, but it'll save and maintain all the specific defaults that are set within that. So everything from text styles to save plan view types and style of doors and what have you. So those kind of defaults, those will save within the actual template file. So moving those from one plan or from one computer to the next, that definitely is going to maintain all that information for sure.
Oh, okay, I see. Thank you.
No problem.
Taylor, we have Kathy Rails here with a question. Hi, Kathy. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. So we have a team of about 14 people, different roles and responsibilities as far as the working on the plans. We currently are saving our files on a local file server, but with COVID, the majority of our people are now working remotely. So as far as saving and sharing has become increasingly slow and whatnot. Is there a way, because what they're doing now is they're basically pulling the files from the file server, they're working on them locally, and then uploading them back. So is there a better way, like would we benefit from using like either a Dropbox or a Box Sync to store them instead of our local file server, just so it isn't that painful, watching it spin as it downloads and re-uploads process?
Yeah, it gets a little complicated because typically speaking, what we usually recommend is, even if you're using some sort of a cloud system, be it Dropbox or iCloud or whatever, we still typically recommend to do almost exactly what you're doing. So you have like that local copy that you're using, and then you're just using that cloud, using that network storage location as really just the sort of the storage, but you're going to copy it locally, do whatever you need to do, and then copy it back. it's still a good idea to do that just in case. And I know there are some other typing questions in there as well that kind of touch base on this about really the speed and the efficiency of using cloud storage. You know, if I put something on the cloud and then open up that file and work on it from there, does it, you know, slow things down? Is it more complicated anyway? And a lot of that depends on the cloud system that you're using, because like this box system that I have here, I bring this folder over here, it is just this folder in my user location, and any file that's in here, it just simply saves up to the cloud and then you know resyncs to my other computer. Box is not a particularly sophisticated one, so to say. There's some other ones I don't recall if OneDrive does. I know things like iCloud, and I think there's some other ones too, that what they actually do is they take that file that you have in that cloud storage and they kind of move and copy it up, but then they change that file on your computer to be it's called a symlink or a symbolic link. So it's not really technically on your computer. Your computer just thinks that it is. And in those kind of situations, you know, you'll open up that folder and you'll see, hey, I've got this plan file, and I'm going to double click it to open it. And then Chief has to say, well, hold on a second, because that has to literally pull down from the cloud storage and then open. So that kind of thing can slow things down and is really not any more efficient. But if it's not a very, you know, high tech kind of backup system, then yeah, that file is just local on your system and it isn't really going to do anything and it's not going to change much. And that, you know, which one is which, you just kind of have to research and find out which ones, kind of how they function and what they do. But you know, the pros and cons there, of course, is that if it is actually pulling it off your computer and just replacing it with a link, it's not taking place on your computer. It's you know, you're freeing up disk space. So it's technically better for that. But as far as actually like working on the file, it's really not ideal. So you'd still, with that kind of setup, want to do pretty much exactly what you're already doing. So there's really not much of a benefit from using cloud than doing what you're already doing. And yeah, definitely recommend it if you're using a network storage location like that. Try not to work on it over the network. It's just going to add network latency into opening and saving and doing things. And yeah, just kind of complicate stuff. So certainly you're doing the right thing, just copying it locally, working on it from there, and then putting it back once you're done. And then, of course, you know, as you well know, it just takes communication with your teammates. So, you know, if two people are working on the same thing at once, then you're going to run into problems. So,
is there any way to speed up the download process? Is there any sort of setting for the larger, more complex files that we're not taking advantage of?
Potentially, yeah. If I open up Chief again here, it kind of depends on the file and the plan that you're working on, but there are a couple of different things that the program will save, and some things kind of just build up. On one hand, the CAD block management, it's not probably the bigger one, and that one is actually usually set to, well, usually I say, usually set to purge these automatically. But basically any CAD block that exists from placing any sort of item anywhere in the plan is going to have a CAD block attached to it. And these build up and they take up some space. I mean, they're just CAD, but still, if you've got, you know, a lot of unused ones, you know, it just takes up space on the system, and it can, in a way, bloat your file. I think one of the more pressing ones, though, is specifically on the plan side, looking under 3D materials and looking at your plan materials. It is quite common, quite often that I see people with plans that have this plan materials list that has a bunch of this in use column that are unchecked, meaning that all these materials that have been used at some point in time in the plan, maybe change your mind, maybe just kind of swap, you know, back and forth between a bunch of different materials or different colors. And the program will remember all those different materials. So if you paint your siding, I don't know, some sort of a vinyl siding or something, and then change your mind and change it to a you know, shake or lap or something, that original vinyl siding is still in memory somewhere, just in case you want to go back to it. But the program doesn't know to automatically just wipe that stuff out. And these can definitely take up space in your system because there's an actual, you know, JPEG or PNG or whatever that's associated with that. Maybe some bump map files. There's more going on for a material. So if you have a lot of unused materials, that can definitely make the size of your plan get larger. And of course, that's inherently going to slow down the whole process. But hitting this purge button here will wipe out any unused materials, and that cleans up a lot of things on your system, makes those plans get smaller and smaller. And you'll definitely see too, if you do that backup entire plan or backup entire project, when you grab those all those referenced files, that's every single file that is being used and kind of attributed to this project. So that definitely will kind of cut down on things as well. But other than that,
backing up the entire file, you said, is better than.
Well, it's just that that it includes all those reference files as well, all those materials. If you do this backup entire plan, if you send it to a zip archive, that'll automatically put it into a zip folder rather than just just a generic folder. So for kind of storage purposes, that definitely makes more sense. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it for your situation if you're doing like a network location, although it actually might be better because it's going to be a smaller file, but also that means you have to pull a zip file down and then open that zip file to start working on it. You can't just open the plan directly over the network. But if you zip that down, it'll compress that. And typically speaking, plan files usually compress pretty well. So that's probably not a bad idea if you're looking to speed up the entire process and also just save on disk space as well. So that's probably not a bad plan.
And what would be the procedure for saving them to a zip?
If you have a layout file, it's definitely recommended to go from the layout. But if you just go to File and then Backup Entire Project, you can do Backup Entire Plan from just a single plan file as well. But Backup Entire Project and then leaving it on the top option, the Backup Plan Files and all referenced, and then Backup to zip archive. So once you hit OK there, it just asks you, and if there's any files that can't be found for whatever reason, it'll warn you. But it'll just ask you where you want to save that and what you want to call it, and it just automatically creates a .zip file. So it just compacts it into one little file that it just makes it so much easier just to send it off. Depending on how you have that currently set up on your network, this may be a little bit cleaner because then you can have just a list of projects that is just the zip files for those projects that people can pull down, open up and start working on, and then just recompile a new zip file and then just replace the one that's on the network. So that might work maybe a little bit better for what you're trying to do.
Okay, so even if we pull that down, make revisions, we would just resave another full zip file?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Our next question comes from David Merrick. Hey, David, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, great presentation so far. A question about performance. I'm using OneDrive, and to answer part of your question that you were talking about, OneDrive is pretty smart, and it knows when you're working on a file and changes it automatically to a sync copy, or you can do it manually too. So it automatically creates a sync copy on the computer. And we keep all of our project files on OneDrive. There's two of us working. If I want to share the system library database with my other partner who's working remotely, and I put that in OneDrive, are we going to suffer a performance hit with, every time I look up a faucet, especially, digging deep into a Kohler catalog or something?
Not really, no. The performance, they're technically probably or maybe would be a performance hit at one point specifically. So if earlier in the presentation, what I was mentioning is the library catalogs, it specifically loads that information into Chief Architect when the program launches. So that one time when you launch Chief Architect and it says, okay, where are my libraries? It's going to find all those library files. It's going to load that data.
Oh, yeah.
And that may be a slower process. If something is, being synced or something, that may take some time to pull in. Once they're there, though, they're there. Chief Architect has no sort of behind the scenes knowledge. So if your coworker downloads and installs and thus syncs a couple of bonus catalogs, manufacturer catalogs, and whatever is happening back there, your program won't know until you close and relaunch the software, and then it says, okay, cool, now what are my libraries? So otherwise, just browsing out, it shouldn't really be a problem at all because they're kind of pulled locally anyway.
Okay, if I could ask one more question, do you have any tips on file locking? I mean, there have been several times where, I don't know how we've done it, but we both opened up the same files and made changes to them and they were not locked. And I swear the button's checked.
Yeah, I was going to say there should be actually an option in there for that, but it's supposed to keep those locked, and by default that should be checked for file locking. So it probably shouldn't allow you to, but again, with the cloud storage and symlinks and things, it may complicate things a little bit and may make things a little bit strange because Chief might not think that it's actually technically in use because it's a symlink and not an actual file. So yeah, I mean, I guess the thought process there would probably just be, just to fall back on that concept of copying the file locally when you're working on it locally.
Well, fortunately, the program knows we're screwing up and it saves a sync copy, and then we've got to resolve our problems the hard way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the main things there is when you're doing any sort of a cloud backup share process between two different people, just keeping open communication, just saying, hey, I'm working on this file. Are you in it currently? Because we really don't have any sort of like source control process that says, this file is being used by XYZ person. So there's nothing, really kind of fancy going on there. Be nice though, but yeah.
I guess it should be happening at the level of OneDrive. They should only be checking it out. Maybe there's this, that's a good thing to look at. Maybe there's a setting within OneDrive to keep us from checking out the same file.
Yeah, that I'm not entirely sure of. There very well may be.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
All right, let's check in with Margaret. Hey, Margaret, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Taylor. This is Margaret, and one of my questions goes back to similar to what someone else was talking about, was the plan materials and why they were all duplicated so many times. But the one that you pulled up had two of the same items, both were checked, but they had the exact same name. So how do you go about making those one? And then the next question is there a search bar so you don't have to scroll up and down that list looking?
So getting them to use the same file, or sort of combining things like this bone, and bone,
Right.
They're all the same material. There unfortunately really isn't a great or easy or quick way to just sort of combine these together. I think that would be a fantastic option of having some sort of a reconciling thing here. But yeah, I think if it were a big problem, what I would probably do is actually just replace one of these colors with some other bright color or something, just so it pops out, and then go back into the like a camera view and repaint over it with that specific color. It doesn't necessarily hurt anything to have the two. These are both going to be pulling from the same thing. Really, the only thing is really hurting is just my brain when I look at this list. But when I edit this,
which prompts the question about a search, because it is a pain to go through it, and you've got so many of them, and they're triplet. It just makes the looking harder.
Yeah, there really isn't a search option on here. The best thing that I would really have to offer is in any of these situations, in either this plan materials dialog when you just pull it up, or if you do like the material painter or something and you get that select material dialog, at any point in time when you get these dialogs that pop up, as long as you like click and your focus is in this list somewhere, when I start typing letters in, it's going to take me to different spots within that list. So if I know the file that I'm looking for is leather, I can hit L and it'll take me down there. In fact, I think if I type fast enough, it'll kind of jump around. But that's kind of the best way of kind of jumping to a certain spot. If I know that the one I'm looking for starts with a W, I'll just hit W and it'll jump down there. So then I don't have to scroll through this entire giant list. The biggest issue there always, though, is just going to be remembering what the actual name of that thing was.
Right.
And if it's a, color dash something, then I just got to go down to the C's and just browse through them. But,
So
but
is
that's
this
another really good suggestion for sure.
Is it something
chime
that
in
could
real quick?
possibly come up in the next version?
We can certainly see. We can we'll definitely take any suggestions that we get here and pass them off to our developers. And we're always happy to make adjustments and fix things up, make things a little bit easier for you guys. So
Well, a search in this area would definitely be better, in some way to merge all the ones that are the same together would be great.
yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Taylor, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
This is Adrian. Good news is that we do have a new feature coming in X13 for a search bar in this dialogue. So
Ooh,
your wish is
good.
granted. Wave our little wand. And also, I just wanted to point out that we do have a merge dialogue or merge button in this dialogue. Taylor, if you group select any of those, there's a merge button available there. And it just merges up to the first selected in the list.
Okay.
So we all
Thank
learned
you.
something new today.
Great. Thank you.
All right, let's check in with Claire. Hey, Claire, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey Taylor, I am at a design studio that has multiple designers and assistants, and each one of us shares our or stores our files on a local network, and each user has their own private network, but like say for instance my assistant can access my network. When my assistant opens my files, even though she has access to where I'm saving all of my plan materials, a lot of times they don't show up on her plan when she opens it, or if she's adding a material, it's not available. Are we doing something wrong?
I don't know if you're necessarily doing anything wrong per se. I think where that really comes down to though is where the file is actually looking for that particular image. If it's somewhere specific onto your computer and not like a network location, then that's definitely going to come up. If you're, well, especially if you've got multiple different networks in different locations, I think it definitely can get a little bit muddied in there. There's, I don't want to explain exactly how it works, but there's sort of a search hierarchy too. So when the program looks for a certain file, this particular texture, it looks first where really at this location, but then it starts looking in other locations. If it can't find it, next to where the actual plan file is, there's a couple different places where it looks for things. So it does definitely try. It doesn't just give up and say, oh, I can't find it, so never mind. It looks all over the place to see if it can find that file.
Okay.
But if it's not in any of those normal locations, then it won't. But certainly, if this location is somewhere that's just completely not on this computer, or like a network location that's specific to their network and not yours, then that would definitely be a good reason as to why. So I think without seeing it specifically, it's really hard to answer. But I would probably just want to take a look at some of those locations. When that comes up, actually, I can probably prompt it again, unless it'll yell at me again. Yeah,
I think we need to start working off of a shared library, and what that might alleviate some of those issues.
Yeah, and just making sure that everything is all at least relative local. And yeah, if you have a shared user catalog, then that certainly makes things a little bit easier as well.
Another question kind of pertaining to the catalogs, say we work with Dura Supreme Cabinetry and they came out with a new catalog update. When I download that, now there's multiple catalogs in my library. But if I delete the older catalogs, any plan that's referenced the previous catalogs, is that going to eliminate that reference, and is it going to have a problem, or can I delete those previous catalogs?
I wonder if actually, I don't know if Adrian has any insight on that. My concern on that would be when you get duplicates in there, it's because in that bonus library, in the actual folder on your computer, what's literally happening is that you get like this accessories number 5 pets, you'll have one that is just number 5 pets, and then one that's number 5 pets, and then in parentheses 2, it's the second version of that file. And your bonus library is going to reflect that as well. It just doesn't know to name it differently. So the concern there would be if you did have like a 2 and a 3 and a 4 or something like that, and then started using things from different libraries, I would suspect that you're kind of crossing that link between them. So I would suspect that it probably would cause issues if you start deleting the other ones. But I don't know for sure if it actually searches into other folders similarly. Adrian, do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I can give you some feedback. So my first comment is it's kind of odd that you're seeing a duplicate, and it shouldn't behave that way. So that's not expected behavior, I guess. I would point out that if you have a catalog installed already and you think there's an update or something like that, the very first course of action I would do instead of re-downloading the catalog is to use the update tool. Yeah, Taylor's showing it right now. And what happens, as long as you're connected to the internet, the program's going to reach out to our 3D library server, and it will just get the latest one and install it for you. So you shouldn't have to do anything extra. If you do have a scenario like you're concerned about with the with duplicates, and if you wanted to delete an old one, I don't think you should have too much of an issue for objects that are already in your project. Whenever you place something in your project, that object gets stored in the plan file itself. So it's kind of just a copy that comes out of the library and goes into your plan. Also, I don't know, Taylor, if you click on an item in the library browser and then look down on the status bar, each object has its own unique ID. So you might have to choose an individual. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't show here, but each of those objects, even though they have a name in the browser, they have their own unique ID, and that should stay preserved even if we update the library catalog. So Chief should know what that object is, and hopefully you don't see other consequences of deleting those old libraries.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the way to really avoid it is when you go through that catalog download, because I run into it myself, just kind of playing around with stuff. But whenever you download something from here, your browser will just download that file as a klibz file. When you download that file again and it's still in your downloads folder, that's when you get that number 2, number 3, number 4. So if you're manually downloading from here, then you're likely to run into that situation where you're going to run into multiple of the same catalog in Chief. But yeah, absolutely. If you do that update library catalog, it'll just update whatever's here with whatever's out there. So that's definitely the best way to avoid that scenario in the first place.
Awesome. That makes so much sense. Thank you.
Let's check in with George. Hi, George. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I've been working with Chief for ever since X1, and with the recent updates of being able to store the user and the library files elsewhere, I actually work on 2 computers, and my main file location is always put my starting plan in Dropbox, so that when I go to either one of my computers, I'm always working with the same plan. What I want to do now is, I know that my library on my desktop doesn't match my library of downloads on my laptop. And I know my user library on my laptop doesn't match the user library on my desktop. So believe it or not, I just upgraded to X12. I kind of wait till the end. And so both of my computers, I have a solid state drive. So my D drive is where my data goes. And so on both my computers, my system library database, I put down on the D in program data, Chief Premier X12. Now my laptop user file, I put out into Dropbox, into a folder on Dropbox. On my desktop, I went ahead and put my user file in my data folder. Now, if I decide to make the system library and put it out there on the Dropbox so I can share it, is it going to merge those two libraries? And I guess the same question, when I do that and point both computers to the Dropbox file for user folders, is it going to merge those two as well?
Yeah, there's a process that it goes through. There's actually sort of a logic in there that if I come into my folder section here, and I'd previously set these to this chief libraries folder, if I go back to a different location and set this maybe back to the original spot where they're supposed to go, it's going to look out and kind of do a check and say, hey, are there those other things out there? And it tries to kind of merge them together. So it tries to combine them. If there's anything that it will kind of overwrite, it should just, I believe it should just be skipping them. But it tries to merge those things to make some sort of sense out of it, so that if you download some libraries in one spot and then move it to another spot, that information is moved from this current location to the new location. But it goes through sort of a logic to figure out where it should or shouldn't, what it shouldn't be doing there. But it should be trying to combine those things together.
So on the with the user file, I just didn't know if it may show the user file out there as MSI laptop user file, and then when I change the location for my desktop to make that user file go to the same directory on Dropbox, I didn't know if it might put those out there under MSI desktop. I just didn't know if it would separate the two user files.
I think the main thing there, and maybe I'm not entirely understanding the question, but when you use something like Dropbox or anything like that, as long as you're using that same Dropbox folder, on two different computers, Dropbox can be set to sync into two different spots. So, computer one can be looking at one location that's specific to that. Computer two can have a completely different location, but they're still the same sort of Dropbox folder, the same synchronized folder, more or less. But as long as both computers are looking at the same respective Dropbox location, then it should just look and say, oh, hey, there's my library files. I'm going to copy them over, and if I need to merge or pull anything in, then it'll do that. So as long as both computers are looking at the same or the respective Dropbox folder for that computer, then there shouldn't really be any problem. They should essentially just be the same folder, and there shouldn't be any sort of loss or anything in there. It should definitely try to merge them together as best as possible. User library, though, is maybe kind of the weird part there, because with the system library files, the bonus, the manufacturer, the core catalogs, each one of those catalogs is kind of its own individual file. So all the different bonus catalogs that you've downloaded, if you've got kind of a mix of different things from one computer to the other, those two should kind of merge together. Whatever is on one system and the other, they kind of become one. The user library file, though, is just a user database file. So if you have wildly different things on two different computers, then one's going to have to override the other. We can't really take the contents of that database and merge those with the contents of the other database. So for that kind of scenario, before really syncing those and getting them looking at the same place, what I would definitely do would be to take my user catalog and export from one computer or from one library on one system, whichever one, doesn't really matter which one, but export that whole thing and then go in and import that on the other computer and kind of forcefully make that merge. And then I'd probably, just to be safe, once I have that merged library, I'd probably do that again, export the merged version, then set those files to look at the same location. And in the event that something crazy happened and it actually merged the wrong one, then at least I can just import my backup. So with the user catalog, it's a little bit special because of that. But this export library is going to be a lifesaver. If there's any situation where you think that you might be losing some data and you're at all concerned or worried about that, this is going to be the main thing you want to look at. If you're moving from one computer to the other, even if you're not using cloud stuff, this is kind of the best way of doing that, because those users or database files, they can get pretty big. So this will back up the entire thing, just make a separate file for it. And there is like an import process, but if you just double click on that file when you take it over to the other computer, it'll just automatically open up in Chief. So it's pretty easy to import them in.
Hey Taylor, this is Scott. Could I just add something to this?
Absolutely.
George, I recently have 2 computers and I use Dropbox, and they were at different stages of the game where my libraries weren't consistent in any way. Sounds like maybe that's a similar situation that you're in.
Exactly.
So what I did is I determined which computer was kind of the most up to date, or what I would refer to as the master. And with that one, I made sure that all my stuff was on Dropbox and inside the preferences there, Taylor. So what I did was for my user library on my master computer, that's something Dropbox. And on the secondary computer, it's in my local library folder. And what I ended up doing was on my computer that wasn't the master, is I just went into those folders, and Taylor, you may not feel good about this, but I actually just deleted everything on that secondary computer out of those folders manually. So I just deleted it. And then in this field that Taylor's highlighted on, I posted that same Dropbox link in there for the user library, and then down below for the system library. And then that took a while to sync, and it was all then exactly in line and worked fine for me.
Okay, so the question was, when you did that, did you clear out just the user library, or did you clear out the core libraries as well and the manufacturer libraries also?
Yep, I deleted everything out of that secondary computer.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, and remember, that was just assuming that my main master computer was all up to date, had everything that I exactly wanted. And once I was confident with that, then I went into that secondary computer and found the folder and deleted everything out of it completely. And then I pasted in my Dropbox link, let it sync away, and worked fine in my case.
Yeah, I got you. I think that I understand exactly what you did. And then, like he was talking about doing the export library, kind of gives me a backup of things. And honestly, I really don't have that much stuff in the user libraries. So I mean, I could combine those user libraries like he was talking about, export from one, import to the desktop, make that be the master, and then I might have some manufacturing libraries and some other stuff, some bonus stuff that's not the same on the other one. But I think those 2 libraries will probably merge easier than the user.
Yeah, they definitely will.
Okay.
Yeah, the only concern that I would have with Scott's method there is that it is kind of specific to saying that on computer 1 I've got like an older version of my user catalog, and on computer 2 I have a newer version that has more stuff, the same but more. If they're just completely different and kind of asynchronous, like I've added some on one computer and some on another computer, then they may just be kind of totally out of sync, and I really need to merge them together. And that's where I would probably do an export and try to find some way of making that work. But it is some manual work to get them to manually merge. The bonus and manufacturer, those things will essentially merge on their own, just because each and every single one of these is just an individual library catalog file. So those are kind of not like they're no big deal, but it's less of a concern with those ones. They kind of zipper into each other. So
yeah, a little bit of a no-brainer, So anyway, I think the deal is just do it, right? Yeah, just do it. And I don't know for all the other people that are listening out there. When I decided to go to Dropbox, and that's where I have all my files set up, my new client files. So when I set up a new client file, I just copy that folder from Dropbox down to the next project. And I've never had any synchronization issues working with one computer on that plan and then going to another computer and working on it, mainly because I have to drop the license on one, activate it on another one. That's plenty of time for the files to sync. And so I know that I'm always going to be working with the latest copy of the file, and I've never had any issues.
Yeah,
So,
it's usually not so much of a problem. The one that I have, it's just an old one, this box sync program. It took a good 5 or 10 minutes just for a simple slide picture. One of these images that I made took a while to get from my other computer to this one, but I think it's a not the most common Dropbox type or cloud type program out there. Dropbox I've had really good luck with. They're usually pretty quick, but kind of depending on how sophisticated they are, I think they have some sort of detection to see like, are you actually using this thing? And if not, then just up it goes. Other ones that are not quite so sophisticated, they just have a timer. So they just kind of wait every 5 minutes. They kind of look and go, yeah, well, I guess we'll sync that stuff. So it just depends on which one you're using. But things like iCloud and OneDrive, the things that come with our computers that Microsoft and Macintosh give us, they work pretty good. So I don't know if there's really been gigantic, huge issues with those things. They're usually pretty quick to update. So.
Okay, well, thanks. That answers all my questions.
All right.
Taylor Erin wrote in her question, and she was wondering, do we need to keep the old data and program files from prior versions?
Oh, okay, sure. No, not necessarily. When you install a new version of the software, it keeps that old version or that old information, but there's a migration process at the very beginning when you very first launch X12 or now X13 coming around the corner here. When you very first launch it after installing it, there's a migration process that comes up that's going to take all that information that you had previously from your bonus manufacturer, even the core libraries and your user libraries and a bunch of other things too. But it's going to migrate that information over into the new installation. So from day one, it should be exactly what you had before. It actually copies over and then does an update as well. So it makes sure that everything's all up to date. At that point, the only reason why I would really ever recommend, and I think the only reason why we don't just straight up delete it, is just in case you end up needing to go back. Sometimes there's kind of overlap of if you're in the middle of a project and you're working on something in X12 and you install X13, you don't necessarily want to just jump everything into X13 when we're kind of in the middle of a project. You kind of want to finish that up in X12, get that project done and working, and then new projects start them up in X13. So for that reason, you probably want to keep both programs installed, and of course, obviously your data from one and the other. But at the point that you're kind of done, and even say I'm just going to uninstall X12 and just move on to X13, at that point you can probably just go in and just remove any of that old stuff. It's really not going to be doing anything other than just taking up space on your system anyway. So I personally can't conceive of any good reason why to keep that information around, and if anyone else does, then they can chime in. But mostly it just takes up space, especially if it's like an old like X10 version. Sometimes you just go digging around and there's just old stuff on there. But we don't delete that stuff just in case you reinstall the software. We don't want to have to re-download all that same stuff in there. So it does have a tendency to linger.
Taylor,
All right.
can I get in for a second?
Absolutely.
I found this is Al, by the way. I found before you delete things like that, find the auto archives and back that up.
Mm-hmm.
Those are old files. It's not so much the program files that you worry about as the auto archives. If you can keep that record, sometimes you have to go back and find some files. It's handy to have those things.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Rather than just kill things, back up the auto archive before you delete the older version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Thanks.
so these folders, no, thank you, Al. Absolutely, that's a very good point. Because these folders themselves, the actual data folders, like I have the X11, even though I haven't launched X11 in ages, on this computer at least. So I have my archives from my previous versions, and I've got a whole bunch of other things in here as well. But yeah, the archives definitely is something that is important. My user database library, it got migrated over anyway, so that's not important at all. But yeah, I probably don't necessarily want to delete that, and it would probably make sense to back that up and keep that. These files in here aren't really going to be taking up a whole lot of space on your computer, though. So I don't know that I would necessarily concern myself too much with being worried about deleting these data files. The other spot where things do tend to pile up is actually in. Get back to my preferences here. Is our system library database folders, because that's where the core, the bonus, and the manufacturers live. There is a kind of a funky way of finding those files, but on any computer, if you hit that show path button down here, it'll show you the location of all these things. And if we find the either core, bonus, or manufacturer, you can see they kind of just live in this location. If you hit Show in Explorer, or for Mac, it's Show in Finder, that'll open up that folder where these things live. And on this computer right now, they're all in this C chief libraries. But by default, they go into this program data folder, which it's a hidden system folder, so you can't just get into it normally. This is kind of the easiest way of finding it. But there's going to be a backup of all of those previous versions in there. So my X10, X9, X8, my system libraries are going to be in there, and they take up a lot of space depending on how much stuff I've downloaded. So that is probably more important as far as your system, like disk space concerns are concerned. I would definitely go into there and clean those things out and just see what it'll is kind of hiding back there, because you might have some older versions of things that are taking up a couple gigs of space that haven't even touched in a while. So again, that's just under the that show button under general folders.
All right, thank you, Taylor. We have Christopher. Hey, Christopher, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, so a couple of things. One, we use OneDrive and SharePoint, and it works very well. We still have some issues with syncing catalogs and things, but a lot of things we went over here today are helpful. Mm-hmm. But the SharePoint drive really works well. It helps manage storage and downloads pretty quickly. So that was a good solution for us. We have an issue with materials and making sure every time someone opens up a file on a different computer, almost half of the materials that were used are not loaded on that computer, and we're saving them to SharePoint, so they're in the project file. And we're not sure if maybe we have a chief library that we all access off of the SharePoint. And we thought, is it better to file the materials with the project, or file the materials in a central location that then Chief can look for them?
Well, I think my main concern on that would be kind of what I mentioned before, is how the system kind of searches and looks for things if and when it can't find things. So if it's loading a file and it says, oh, hey, I'm looking for whatever this JPEG file is, and I can't find it, one of the very first places that it looks is to say, well, my plan file lives here. Is that same file right here? And is it in any subfolders within that folder? So, having them with the project is kind of the more direct way of doing that. And it would definitely avoid that kind of scenario. So if you have some sort of, even if you have like a textures folder or a materials folder inside of that project, then that should alleviate any of that, because then it should, in the event that it loses it for whatever reason, it should be able to find it as long as it's within that project. I think I would have more concerns over having like a shared location or a specific specified location for those, just because from one computer to the next, it may have a hard time potentially kind of resolving and reconciling exactly where that is for that particular computer. But yeah, if it's in the project folder, I think that makes the most sense. I don't know if anyone, Adrian or anyone has any other feedback that makes more sense for that, but that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I would add, sorry to kind of take over again, just to point out that you can, if for some reason you do need to keep your directory in a shared location, you can add linked directories. And I think that's in the tools menu. If you go to...
I've only ever found it when I get that prompt.
I know, I always forget too. It's under checks, tools, checks. So, yep. And that missing files check at the bottom.
There we go.
When that dialog pops up, there's the, yeah, there you go. You got it.
So this guy down here, so add search directory. So this adds to that hierarchy list, because there's a whole process where the program looks to find a file if it's missing. But yeah, if you have a specific spot for it to look, then you can add this in there, and then it'll look for, it'll say, hey, my plan file's here. Does that file exist here or in any subfolders? And then it goes on to other places. I forget exactly where in the list, in the hierarchy list, these new ones go in, but at any rate, if it can't find the file in any of these other places, then it searches these ones as well. So that
So it's tools, checks.
Yeah, so tools, checks, and then missing files check. That's how you're gonna. That's how to sort of prompt that to come up. This is the same thing that comes up whenever there is some missing file. So typically speaking, you're just going to say, open up that file. If and or when this message pops up, it'll always be down at the very bottom. There's that add search directory. If you already have that file open and you've passed that and said, hey, just go away and leave me alone, then that's where you can go into tools, checks, and missing file check to re-prompt that message.
I always tell it to leave me alone.
Yeah, we did.
So my one other question here would be, so we have 3 users on, and I only have one login to Chief Architect's kind of, the license management. We have the 3 licenses, but is there a way to track who is touching the file when, so that, like, if I look for an update that maybe Emily did or Rachel did, can I see who did that update, or is there no audit trail on the file?
Not really. The well, on the actual plan files themselves, there's the time tracker. That's kind of the best sort of auditing that we have of showing kind of who's poked at what, but it's very specific to this particular file. So it'll show or show whatever user and time and date. But this is just specifically for the plan files themselves. It really doesn't kind of go beyond that. So if that's what you're looking for, then yeah, absolutely, right there. But
yeah,
otherwise,
yeah, set up separate users, I guess, under my account.
Yeah, no, you're talking on like the digital locker logon, right?
Yeah. So how would that know which user was using it?
It's based on whatever computer name you're in. So if you when you log onto the digital locker, it'll show that it's active on and then whatever the computer name. So as long as the computers are named something better than just like some random serial number or something like that, then you'll be able to tell who's got it, where, and when. But and then you can pull it away from them and use it yourself. But other than that, there really isn't kind of a great little management system there to show exactly who's got it when and where. But it's just really more what computer is using it.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
All right. No problem.
We have Wilson here with a question. Hey, Wilson, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, what's the main reason to do the backup, please?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
What's the main reason to do the backup?
There's a lot of reasons to do backups. Really, I mean, if you're like sharing or moving a plan or project from one computer to another, obviously is a good reason to do the backup. Just for posterity or just to make sure that you don't lose any files, I think is probably the most common. Doing the backup entire plan or backup entire project and then saving things onto like a cloud storage is a really great way of just making sure that you'd never lose anything, in case you're working on like a laptop and computer crashes or something or gets stolen. You never really know what your computer's going to do. So those kind of things are probably the biggest reason, the biggest draw for people to do any sort of backup like that.
Okay. Now, what's the best practice to reduce the file size?
So the file size, sometimes it can just kind of get away from you regardless, depending on how complex the program gets or that particular project. So the more stuff you have in there, it's just going to get bigger and bigger no matter what. But like I was showing earlier, under the materials and plan materials, I think is probably one of the biggest, just because the plan materials can kind of pile up, and you end up quite often with a lot of unused materials, and they become kind of integrated within the plan, and those can get larger and larger as you go. So going into that plan materials periodically and purging out any unused ones, that's pretty much hands down just the first place that I always look whenever a file is getting really, really big. If it seems like the file is much, much larger than it should be, then there may be something kind of weird going on with that file, and that may be actually probably a situation where we probably want to talk to our tech support and just kind of find out what's going on there. But the program naturally kind of culls out and removes any sort of wasted dead information that it doesn't need when you both open and close that particular plan. So you might even see the file size kind of changing and shifting around as you're working on it. But mostly it's things like the unused plan materials, unused CAD blocks, that sort of thing. If we purge that stuff out, then that usually helps. Other than that, if it's just a matter of it taking up too much space on your computer, kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about doing the backup entire plan or project and then putting it into a zip archive if you're needing to back it up for some reason. If it's just really big and taking a lot of time to load on your computer in general, it's kind of another story. Sometimes there's not much to do about it. It's just a complex plan. There's just a lot of stuff in there. But we've definitely seen situations where sometimes you have something kind of weird and squirrely going on with that plan, and there's just something in there that just makes it really, really big for some strange reason. A couple things you can do to avoid it, though, would be if you ever import some sort of a 3D object, 3D material, or a 3D symbol from some other place, like the SketchUp 3D warehouse, or I guess it's the Trimble 3D warehouse now, or really any sort of 3D repository where you're going to find some sort of symbol item. Sometimes those objects are not really made great, and they're not really they're not optimized for use in Chief, and they may look fantastic, but they're very, very, very complex, and those files can be really, really, really big, and those kind of things can definitely slow down your plan and also make the plan much larger as well. So a lot of that stuff is it just depends on the situation. But again, yeah, if you run into a situation where most of your plans are fine, but you've got like one plan that is just insanely big and really, really slow or something, probably just reach out to our tech support team and have them take a look at it and see if we can find out exactly what's causing that to be so big.
Taylor, our last question comes from Brandon. Hi, Brandon, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. It's maybe a little less about file management and maybe more about license management.
Okay.
Maybe this is more of a product enhancement request than anything else. But okay. So I'm, my email is attached as, the main email, and I've got, let's just say, a dozen licenses. Mm-hmm. And, it would be wonderful to have like a main email that, could log people on or off at will. But it would also be nice to have a place where individual people that, of course, I don't want them to always come to me and ask to log me out, log me in, mm-hmm. based on them forgetting to do something. But what I'm really going to is that I want them to be able to do that with their own thing. Mm-hmm. But as turnover happens, now you've got my license. Mm-hmm. It would be nice to have a way to be able to terminate, obviously we're not terminating the license number.
Right.
I just want to terminate the ability for you to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that's something that was being looked at, but certainly, we can pass that on for sure. Having some sort of administrative access and, sub accounts basically, it's definitely a good idea. It would definitely be nice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Looks like that's all we have for today. Did you have any announcements you wanted to make, Taylor?
I know we do have some additional things coming up for any additional resources. If you guys want any sort of kind of refreshers on anything that we went over, again, we're going to be sending out the video of the recording of this. But at any point in time, if you go onto our web page, we've got the list for the free webinars. We've got training seminars coming up. Pretty much everything that I talked about here, if you actually get back to Chief Architect, under support and then knowledge base, right on our main page, there's actually a file management subsystem here or subset. And this has all the different help topics and articles on most everything that I talked about and then some. So if there's any specific things that you need to kind of refresh on outside of that, definitely take a look at these. And on our events, trade shows, and training, we've got personal training. We've got events coming up, so definitely check us out. And yeah, if there's anything at all, always reach out to us, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. But yeah, I thank you all for coming.